listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 443.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoors Station on this damp and overcast day at the beginning of August 2017. Now, where has all the sun gone? July saw us basking in good old-fashioned summer heat of our youth. And now we're all wondering if it's all just a distant memory. Our hands have been somewhat full over the last few weeks, and sadly, I'm afraid to say, I just didn't have time to get a podcast done. However, this one should keep you topped up as I chat with Rose, who has just completed the 102-mile national trail, the Cotswold Way. And I recorded this interview with her a few days after her return. Of course, all the photos and additional things we talk about will be over on the outdoorstation.co.uk website, so check us out there. Now, before we get into conversation though, I just want to say a quick hi and thank you to all the folks who have recently joined our newsletter page over on the Outdoor Station. And I know I haven't mentioned you recently, and that's because of the series of interviews and podcasts that have been released. However, I'm going to be going through all the details and discussing some of the things you've mentioned in the next production.
Well, due to various circumstances, we didn't manage to get up to Skye to do the Skye Trail, which we had planned in May, which I was really disappointed about, as Bob had already stretched his legs doing the Two Moors Way, and I felt I got really itchy feet. It was a long time since I'd done a decent length walk. So I sort of was looking around to see what I could do. I knew I couldn't take another week off work as we're getting into our busy time, and to do the next section of the Pennine Way, which is what I would ideally like to have done. So I looked closer to home. You were doing a dry stone wall course in Bath, and I thought, hang on a minute. The Cotswold Way actually finishes in Bath, so if you're actually down there in Bath, I could get a lift back if I did the Cotswold Way. And looking at it, because it's sort of local to our area, I reckoned I could get it under my belt in 3 weekends camping and take the dog.
Okay, so for people that perhaps aren't familiar with the Cotswold Way, just a brief overview of distance and sort of terrain it crosses?
Right, it's about 102 miles, something like that, depending on routes that you take and which ways you go, but about 100 miles. It starts in Chipping Campden and finishes in Bath, or of course you could do it the other way around. And it basically follows the spine of the Cotswolds down. So a lot of it follows escarpment land, but it's quite varied. A friend of mine described it as bucolic, very beautiful and prosaic and very, rolling countryside. All sorts of terrain, mixed from sort of heathland, escarpments, to beech woods, to arable land, farmland, real mixture.
So let's break the weekends down. It was July 2017. The weather has been really pleasant for the beginning of July. So how did you break the weekends down in distance, and what were the weather conditions like?
Right, the first weekend I did Chipping Campden, the start of the way, through to Birdlip. The weather was pretty good, actually. I think I wore shorts all day on the Sunday and half of the Saturday, so it was pretty warm and a fair distance. I did about 16 miles the first day and then about 22 the second, reasons for which I'll explain later.
Okay, and then the second weekend?
Second weekend was from Birdlip through to Wootton Under Edge. In fact, that weekend you joined me, which was brilliant. It was really nice to walk together.
And of course, the final run into Bath?
The final run into Bath was obviously Wootton Under Edge through to Bath. I didn't say, sorry, the distances on the second weekend was about 20 miles the first day and about 12 or so the second day. And then Wootton to Bath was about 32 miles.
Okay, so it's July 2017, as I say, that you're doing this. Now, you chose to do it a particular way with the intention of camping and taking the dog. So there were certain limitations which you had to consider with your equipment and gear and the approach. So can we just talk briefly about that?
I really wanted to do it as light as possible, for obvious reasons, but I wanted to take the dog and I wanted to camp, partly because the Cotswolds is an expensive place. Bed and breakfasts are more expensive, and being July and I'd sort of done this fairly off the cuff, I knew it would be difficult to book places anyway. So I really wanted to camp with the dog, but as I'd discovered last year doing the Pennine Way, I can't carry sufficient weight for the things I need to take for the dog and camp. So my compromise this time was to camp but take no cooking gear. So just losing that cooking gear meant my pack then was doable. So I found I had a base weight of 10 kilos, including 2 days food for the dog and her dog equipment. And then if I added my sort of snack food, because there weren't always good places to buy food on the way, plus water, it went up to about 12 and a half.
And if people are interested in want more information about what Rose took for the dog and camping with the dog, then let us know via email and we'll perhaps do a quick video, because I'm sure it'll be of interest to certain people. So you're going as light as you could practically, but camping, so carrying your own equipment. Now, what about the other people that you met en route? Because it was obviously 3 weekends. Did you meet other people?
Yeah, we did meet quite a few people, actually. There were a lot of people who were doing it in sections. Either, just when they could manage it, they'd do a section, most of whom lived sort of fairly locally, so they could drop cars off and organise it that way. Met a school party, which were really fun, which was obviously a parent-teacher type event, because the age of the children were sort of mixed years, secondary, so from sort of year 7 up to A-level, I think, probably, with different parents and teachers, and that was quite a fun group, and they were doing only sort of maybe a small section at a time. They thought it would probably take them till next year to finish it. They stopped when the weather got bad, and they were quite fun. I met one through hiker, as we'd say, who was doing it fairly lightweight and camping, and he overtook me. I'm fairly fast, but he overtook me and was gone. It was his second attempt at it, and I was asking him about camping, because that's quite an issue, as I found out. And he was saying he was either wild camping, camping late, pitching late, and clearing out very early so as nobody saw him, or his other main source was landlords from pubs saying, yes, you can camp in the beer garden, and yeah, there are a few of those.
And certainly when I was with you that weekend, we met a couple of Americans that were doing it with the luggage transferal system, and I think you met more since.
Yes, indeed. That was the other sort of source, if you like, of people walking the way. People actually I caught up with a couple of times, and they were usually American, had chosen to do it. In fact, the one lady said it was the toss-up between the West Highland Way and the Cotswold Way, and she was told about midges, so opted for the Cotswold Way very wisely.
Sensible option. Let's talk about the actual sections now and what it was like underfoot, as it were. Try and describe it as best we can for people that may be considering it, have heard about it, but actually have not sort of looked at any detail. And certainly the midsection that I did with you, I felt overall that it was very beautiful, fairly remote in many respects as you can get. We didn't seem to pass through many villages and towns and places to top up with much. And we'll come on to one of the two of the issues that we had with the dog as well. But was that the case on that first weekend? It sort of took you straight off onto the escarpment, as it were, and you didn't really dip into many sort of flesh pots to get food, or that's the dog, by the way, in the background, not Rose scratching herself, to get top-ups of any food and that type of thing?
There weren't many. There was a few. I mean, at the beginning, you drop down into Broadway, which is quite fun because of all the tourists and some very nice shops and coffee shops. But after that, there's not a lot. And actually, I was glad I took snacks with me. The first two sections were definitely my favourite. The last, not so much. But the first two were just beautiful. Climbing up and down the escarpment, basically, in and out of villages. But the scenery was stunning. You've got moorlands, you've got arable farm fields, you've got rolling hills, you've got sheep, some beautiful, beautiful beech tree forests and woods that we walked through. So a real huge variety, plus some fantastic history that you walk through. And I think that's the beauty of following a long-distance trail. Somebody has worked out the most scenic routes, avoiding roads as much as possible, and also giving you a real taste of not just the scenery, but the geology and the history of the place as well. So, I mean, really does. In fact, to some extent, on that second weekend, it was really hot, and the route took you right round to get a viewpoint where you thought, actually, I could just cut across here, and I think I've seen enough fantastic views, thank you. It was really beautiful. As I say, the last section going down into Bath from Wootton Under Edge was perhaps my least favourite, but partly maybe that was the weather, because that last weekend was really wet and muddy. First 2 weekends I walked a lot in shorts, and that last weekend I think I walked nearly all in waterproofs.
Yeah, a bit of a difference. But you were using the Cicerone Press guide written by Kev Reynolds as your Bible for the actual trip, and as you say, it's full of information. But even Kev himself mentioned, I believe, that camping is a very, very hard thing to come by.
Yeah, indeed it was really. I also took the Harvey's Map. I'm a great fan of Harvey's Maps and Cicerone Press. I think between the two you have a really good guide, because all the added information in the book is just brilliant. But he said there's not much camping, and on the Harvey's Map there's only about 2 sites actually marked on the trail for camping out of the whole 100 miles, which is crazy.
Yeah. The Outdoor Station is your one-stop shop for audio and video entertainment for the self-powered traveller. You can find us online, on internet radio, on smartphones, on smart TVs, on YouTube, on Apple TV, on Now TV, and on Facebook. You can also stream us live via the iTunes app or TuneIn radio app. The list is continually expanding, and for full details of how to subscribe, download or stream and enjoy our massive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk. So coming back to the first weekend we sort of initially started talking about, what was your camping issue on that particular section, the first couple of days?
Well, because camping it's not easy to find a campsite, my days were sort of governed how far I went by how far we could get to a campsite. So my first day was about 16 miles, which was Hale's Fruit Farm, which was brilliant. It's right on the route. They've got a farm shop there and a cafe, so I could have a good feed in the evening. A nice camping site, and it was very reasonable. I think I paid £7 and maybe £2 for the dogs, so £9 for the pitch, which was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. And the cafe was really good value. I had a good feed, and I think I had salad and, cottage cheese and all sorts of stuff, and a big chocolate cake and tea. And again, very reasonable, only sort of £12 I think I paid for it all in. I even bought some minced beef for Pip, so in the farmer's shop they had their own butchery, so that was really good stopover.
And did you find that through the Cicerone guide, or was that just doing some Googling before you went?
I think it was just through research, really, actually. I don't think, although it might be on the Harvey's Map, I think that's one they actually highlight on the Harvey's Map.
But that set you up then for a long day the second day, because I parked at Birdlip and walked towards you, and it was very, very warm. It
was, really. I think that second day was my toughest day. It was 22 miles, I think we probably did, and it was really hot. And it really highlighted, which became more apparent that second weekend you joined me, that water was a real issue for the dog. And my vet's brilliant, and she advised me before I did the Pennine Way about the dog, and she said dehydration in hot weather is something you must consider. And it was hot, and there was a lot of exposed bits because I came over Clee Hill and Clee Common. There was no shade, basically, and I was very conscious of her. So finding water for her, we practically were out by the time we got to Birdlip, and I carried extra water for her. So it was just a case of looking out for any
opportunities.
Troughs
and what sort of opportunities did you find in that first weekend? Because I can add to the second weekend.
Well, there were maybe 2 streams. There was a couple of puddles I found still in existence, but not many. Other than that, it was troughs. So I actually a couple of times went into fields to find a water trough so as I could give her a lot more extra water, and I actually doused her down. I soaked her basically just to help cool her down.
And that was the same routine as we found the following weekend, every half hour?
Yeah, as much as I could. When it was really hot, I mean, at least that second weekend there was more wooded sections, so we did have some shade and some respite.
And you were using one of the folding fossil bowl things for dogs, weren't you? Which actually must have been quite useful for just stopping and pouring, because every time we stopped, obviously on that second weekend again, she drank everything we put in front of her.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just popped it in the back of the pack, and actually she obviously wanted it, because as soon as I stopped and got that out, she was there waiting for me to pour her water. Or if it was by a trough, obviously dip it out for her, and she certainly didn't object to me dousing her down either.
So anything you want to add to that first weekend at all for anybody that might consider it? Was it tough? Would you describe it as tough walking? I mean, the heat didn't make it easy, but the rise and the falls and the climbs, were they sort of just hilly?
There's a couple of quite steep ascents and descents. I mean, I was really glad I took my poles. But, you know, I think if you're heel fit, they're fine, and you can just take your time. The reason I had such a long day, as I explained on that second day, why it was so tough, 22 miles, I wouldn't recommend that. If you can stop, you know, break it out more evenly, then certainly do that, because that was quite a hard day.
OK, well, coming on to the second weekend then, I joined you from Birdlip through to Wootton Under Edge. We, again, left early in the morning. We parked one vehicle at Wootton the previous day, hadn't we? So we left early in the morning from Birdlip. And it was a very, very hot weekend. But as you say, it was pretty well. I'd say 90% of the route was actually shaded. What were your comments on that, and how did it compare to the first weekend?
Well, of course, I had your wonderful company, so.
And I was carrying all the weight.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really nice walk. I think one of the things I didn't say, especially in that first weekend, although it was almost as good the second weekend, was the wildflowers were just stunning. I mean, I really love wildflowers and looking at the countryside and nature. And I think I tried to jot down the ones I saw or knew, and I've got to over 40. And wild orchids, lots of wild orchids. So it really was an absolute joy. Beautiful, beautiful time to do it. Beech trees were fantastic. Went through some fantastic wooded beech woods with just the dappled sunlight coming through. It was just stunning.
The issue with on the second weekend certainly was the heat again and the dog. And I was really, really surprised just how infrequent the trough situation was. I think we found one trough, didn't we, that had water in. All the other ones didn't really have any water in. And if you were taking animal or you needed water yourself, in actual fact, I can't really remember on that first day if there was anywhere that we would have seen that said, can we have some water?
No, there were not many places. I suppose there were a few. You do sort of come down through a few towns, but you'd literally have had to have knocked on somebody's door and asked them for water. There certainly weren't many people about.
No. But that's Saturday, we had to do a longer day. So what were the details for the Saturday through to the campsite? We'll talk about that as well.
That weekend we went from Birdlip through to Woodchester Park. Bob managed to find a glamping campsite, but again it meant we had a very long day. We did about 20 miles that day, and it was hot. It was quite long. I think we started about 8:15 in the morning, and I think we didn't actually stop till about 7:15 at night. That was partly your fault, though, because when I'm with you, we do stop more. So, for example, we got to Painswick and we had a really nice... I had a picnic lunch there, but we did stop in a pub and have half a shandy. And that churchyard was really pretty, wasn't it, with the clipped yews in the churchyard.
Well, it was your fault you wanted to go and look around the churchyard. It wasn't the pub. The pub's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And then another time we actually came past a viewpoint, and there was wonderfully a ice cream van. So there were quite a lot of few people there at the viewpoint, because I have to say the views are stunning off the escarpment across the Severn Plain. It's quite nice looking back at the Malvern Hills. Anyway, because there was an ice cream van, of course we had to stop and have an ice cream as well. So we did stop a few times.
You've got to share the green pound where you can. That particular night, though, the campsite we found was called Thistledown Campsite, which is just off the route by about a couple of miles, would you say?
Yeah.
And it was a glamping site, definitely, and it was slightly different from your first camping.
It was quite a lot different. In fact, I phoned them up and they said, oh no, we're fully booked. And I said, look, we're doing the Cotswold Way. We've got a very small tent. We've got a dog. There's two of us. We'll be in late, gone early. Is there any chance you could squeeze us in? And they emailed me back and said, yes, that would be fine. £28, thank you very much. The campsite was a mile or two off the main Cotswold Way, but it wasn't a bad walk through a village. And when we got there, it was a very lovely glamping site, really. There were lots of families there with big tents. They had a wildflower meadow. They'd made some paths through, and some big old tractors for the children to play on and so forth. They had a cafe there and a little shop, but it was a sort of not the sort of shop you could stock up on goodies for the next day. It was things like organic pasta and pesto sauce and nice honeys. So it wasn't quite the sort of shop that we would want as campers personally. They also had a cafe, which was very nice, with designer beers, and on the Saturday night they had a wood-fired pizza oven, so we could actually order a pizza, which is what we did. But that was quite pricey too, at £11 for not a huge pizza, but it was very nice, but it was quite expensive. They had composting toilets, which actually were very good, and the showers were good. So all in all, very good, but £28 was a lot, I felt, compared to Hales Fruit Farm.
Find out how easy it is to subscribe to all our free programmes. Visit our website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk or look us up on Facebook.
So that was that weekend. We drove back and obviously picked the car up on the way back at Birdlip. So I hope we've described that as well as we can. Just very, very hot. Water was the main thing for the dog, and certainly the camping proved to be as difficult as we anticipated, but we got round that. So let's come on to the final weekend. Again, the weather now changed completely. It had gone from the beautiful, hot, sunny experience you'd had for the first couple of weekends, and it was overcast and sort of fairly dreary. So Wootton Under Edge to Bath, what was the first day?
Rain. You dropped me off at Wootton Under Edge, again, pretty early. I think I was walking by about 8:15. And I started off just in my long trousers and a T-shirt top. But more or less the rest of the weekend I had waterproofs on. It was just wet and muddy. The tracks were much harder just because I was slipping and sliding a lot more on the ups and the downs. And also the countryside for me wasn't as nice. There were quite a few busy roads to cross, just not quite as beautiful as the first two sections that we'd done.
But certainly an interesting contrast for people if they weren't familiar with the UK, if they were American visitors. Obviously, because it was raining, the water stakes for the dog was completely different, was it?
Yeah, I carried extra water and she didn't need it at all, that's for sure. There were lots of puddles, lots of streams, lots of water everywhere, so she was right as rain, no problem at all. Camping, again, was a bit of an issue. I was aiming for Tormarton overnight. There was a Great Western pub called the Compass Inn, which allows camping, but they actually had a wedding on and said it might be a bit noisy. I tried a couple of the B&Bs to see. Apparently one used to do camping, but they no longer did that, and the other one didn't take dogs. And then someone suggested I try the Admiral's Retreat, which is the other pub that was in Tormarton. It used to be called the Portcullis. Anyway, I phoned up the landlord and he said, yes, that would be absolutely fine. I could camp behind the wood pile, which sounds great, and a bit of a beer garden at the back of the pub. So I actually got to Tormarton in good time. It was about 16 miles, and I think I got there by about 2:30, 3 o'clock, because the pub hadn't quite shut. It was absolute torrential rain at this point. The landlord was really good, gave me a cup of tea and pot of tea outside. He wouldn't let us in because the dog was too muddy. There was a bit of an awning out the back, I presume, for smokers. So we sat under that with a pot of tea, and I managed to get Pip's harness off and rub her down and put her warm fleecy blanket and coat on because she was shivering. And we sort of huddled down, and I was just hoped the rain would ease off so I could get the tent pitched. So I suppose I must have sat, read my Kindle and had the pot of tea for an hour or more. I'd text you guys to say where I was, and so I was waiting the rain to stop to pitch. It eased a little bit. In fact, I'd just left the dog and just gone up to pitch the tent in the beer garden and heard a whistle and turned around and you were there.
I know. Well, the dry stone walling course I was doing was actually not that far away, and our course had been cut short because of the weather as well. And when I got your text, I thought you would prefer to have a night inside rather than a night in the tent. Because it was going to be, basically, it was going to be a long night for you. If you'd finished at 3 o'clock and sitting in a tent with a Kindle all night with the dog is a long night, isn't it? Yeah,
and the pub didn't reopen till 6 and food wasn't available till 7. So, yeah, it would have been quite a long stretch.
But good to know that they're happy for people to camp there, which is good. On the Sunday, of course, we dropped you off, I think it was 8 o'clockish again, fairly early before we went to do our bit. And, how was the day? Yeah,
it was not bad at all. Started off, although we did have some dry spot in the middle. Mostly it was wet and rainy and miserable. What was good is because I'd spent the night with Sally and Fraser, some friends down in Bath, I could leave most of my kit with you. And so I just had a day pack, which was brilliant. It meant I actually ran some of the track because it was like, yay, light pack. But it was probably my least favourite section. It was through sort of Bath racecourse and then down. But there was a lot of roads to cross and then actually down and through into Bath. I think I got there about 3 o'clock.
So just briefly then looking at equipment, as I say, if people want to know what you took for the dog, we'll do a little video on that, so just let us know. So basically you had a quilt, sleeping mat, change of clothes, what rucksack, what tent, and anything else?
Rucksack I took, the first weekend I used my Mariposa. Tent I took the Vaude Power Lizard 1-person, 2-person, which I'd used on the West Highland Way. I took that rather than the Hex Peak because it was less weight, and the dog, because it was summer, the dog would come in with me, so I didn't need a separate nest for her or anything. So that actually cut the weight down quite a lot.
There was nothing else really, was it, apart from the dog stuff? So the second weekend I joined you and we used the Hex Peak F6A, but we just used the outer and a ground sheet. Again, quilts, sleeping mats, dog stuff, but you used a different rucksack, didn't you? Yeah,
I took my old Go Light Jam, obviously because we were carrying less. I took all the dog stuff basically, and you took the tent.
So I took all the heavy stuff, yeah.
Oh, yeah, like dog food's not heavy. So it was smaller capacity, so that was fine, that worked out okay. And then the last weekend I reverted back to the same as the week one. I took my Vaude Power Lizard 1-2-person and my Mariposa pack.
Okay, very briefly then, if there was anything that you, looking back on it, you would have changed or updated or corrected on the actual complete trip?
No, I forgot my camp shoes the first weekend, some flip-flops to put on in camp to, let your feet air. But apart from that, no, I think it all worked really well. The other thing I would say, which we haven't mentioned, is from a historical point of view, it's a beautiful walk as well. There is such a lot of history along that track. There's some really fantastic old hill forts. There's some long barrows, all the sort of hill, Cotswold wool trade stuff that goes on, the old mills. There's Roman villas. There's old battlefields from the Civil War. It really is phenomenally rich, as well as sort of manor houses and all sorts. So such a lot of information, which is why the Cicerone Press guide is so brilliant for that information.
The Cotswold Way, an excellent walk, and compared to my recent Two Moors Way trail, remarkably busy with backpackers and day walkers. However, do get hold of a digital or hard copy of the Cicerone Press Guide to see if it's for you. It's full of information, as Rose mentioned. Now, those on a tighter budget will have to plan really well in advance for accommodation, as you've gathered. However, those who use the Sherpa luggage service between bed and breakfast, guest houses or hotels will find accommodation and the walk itself so much easier. So have a think on that, folks. Check it out. If you're coming for some distance, I'm sure you will enjoy it. It's a beautiful part of good old Blighty. So until next time, folks, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.